We're now going to move straight on to our what we call Devolution Part 2 and powers that might be devolved, and it's leading on from Chad's question. And we're going to have three speakers, Mr. Brian Caulfield from Trinity College Dublin, Professor Joe O'Hara from Dublin City University on Education and Skills, Mrs. Sumta O'Neill, the Wicklow County Child Care Manager on childcare. And then once those sessions are finished, we'll break for a coffee and then reconvene to do a roundtable discussion and to pose some questions to this panel. So once again, thank you so much for your time for the panel, and please give a warm Dublin Assembly welcome to Brian, Joe and Assumpta.
So that's your view, but that's what the audience is seeing, so you can just flick through. Okay, great. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Brian Caulfield. I'm an associate professor in the School of Engineering and head of discipline in civil engineering in Trinity. I stood here 5 years ago talking about climate change and transport, and the work you do does make a difference. A lot of the recommendations that were made by the council or by the assembly were in fact enacted. So the work that you're doing here is very important. Right, let me see if I can move these on. I can. So this is our campus. It's at the heart of the city centre. It's also my lab. It's where I do all my research. And the city itself is the lab that I use for all my research. So the things I want to talk about today are, to start off, talking about the population and how people move around our city, also about transport regulation, the powers that a directly elected mayor could take over, some pieces on policy development, infrastructure, the public realm, and some concluding remarks. So this data is hot off the press. It's from the census that was just published during the week. And you can see, first of all, sorry, Tim, I'm not sure where you are now, but Limerick isn't there. But it has Galway, Cork, and Dublin, sorry. And you can see Dublin's population in terms of its density is the highest in the country, followed by DLR, then followed by the whole county. So why is density important? Density is important basically because the more densely populated an area is, the more public transport that you can provide. So Dublin is very different to the rest of the country, as you can see here. So how do we move in our cities? Again, it's just Dublin, Cork, and Galway, with the other counties as well. You can see here, this 57% represents how sustainably we move throughout our cities. The reason I have this here is because internationally, cities that move sustainably tend to be the ones people want to live in. They tend to be the most livable ones. They tend to be the ones that are at the top of indices in terms of cities. And then finally, just in terms of metrics, these are the numbers of public transport trips taken. So I think Tim again mentioned something about volume. I'm from Waterford, and that's at the top there, 1.2 million trips in 2019. And then you can see at the bottom, you can see Dublin, and Dublin has just about 240 million public transport trips in 2019. So it is about volume, it is about the number of trips that are taking place. So the city is very different to the rest of the country. So who's in charge of transport in our city? Primarily the government sets policy, and then you have the 4 local authorities, which we all know about and we're talking about today. Then you have the NTA, who were in charge of the regulation, in charge of planning, in charge of design of public transport networks. And then you have TII, who are in charge of roads and rail construction. So to move on to regulation, you can see here that in terms of the NTA, they're responsible for all of the public transport options that we have in the city. So bus, DART, Lewis, all of these things the NTA are responsible for. Then on the other side, you can see some of the modes that the local authorities are responsible for. They're responsible for, and this isn't an exhaustive list, this list changes constantly, shared bike and shared car operations. And that's only going to increase when we start to add shared scooters to it as well. So in terms of regulation, this is one of the things I was asked to talk about. What should we do in terms of regulation of our public transport networks? London does regulate, the London Mayor does regulate the public transport in that city. They have a fleet of about 9,000 buses in London. It's about 10 times what we have here in Dublin. So in terms of economies of scale, it's huge. In 2020, the NTA operated about 1,800 buses across the nation, and 56% of these were in Dublin Bus. So you can see the majority of public transport services are here in the capital. Then you can see over the past 5 years, there's been a massive increase in the number of public transport or a number of shared operators that have entered the market. And these are the likes of Bleeper, the likes of Moby, etc., that have been added into the network. Each of the local authorities does their own thing here, so that can cause an issue. And then finally, you can see here in terms of taxi regulation, I know it's a big topic at the moment, but you can see that 57% of all taxis licensed in Ireland have a Dublin licence. So again, it's scale, and Dublin is very different. So in terms of policy development, transport in Dublin doesn't exist in a silo. It is very much interconnected to the rest of the country, but also to the rest of the region. So any policy development that the Mayor has would have to include the other counties of the Greater Dublin area. This map comes from the CSO, and basically what it shows is the net commuters, how many people are commuting into a particular area. It's from 2016, so the newer data isn't out just yet. I love the CSO, but this isn't a great map, to be honest. The red areas here show the areas that have increased, more people coming in than leaving on a daily basis. If you look into the M50, inside the M50, the data shows basically there's huge numbers of people travelling in from all over the Greater Dublin area and beyond to work in the city every day. So strategy development would always have some sort of a regional aspect. Transport development in the city wouldn't, I don't think at least, be in a silo. The Mayor of Dublin could have a bigger role in policy development. He or she could have space on the board of the NTA or have better alignment with the Department of Transport in terms of policy development. A mayor with a mandate would be a very powerful tool, and we've seen that a lot in terms of local government recently around cycle lanes, which I'm not going to get into. Internationally, there's many examples exist whereby mayors have been able to work with neighbourhoods at local levels using dialogue and consensus, and I think there are two really important terms in transport planning, that they're present, that we can make changes in terms of how we move around our cities and what we plan for. In terms of infrastructure, many of the cities you've heard about, with the exception of maybe Limerick, in terms of transport infrastructure, they already have amazing transport networks. London, New York, Manchester, Paris, Boston was mentioned as well. They have these networks. We don't. Dublin's paying catch-up after decades of underinvestment in public transport. And it was interesting to hear the former Taoiseach earlier talk about the tunnel as being one of the projects that he was most proud of, and the Lewis. These big kind of ticket projects have been massively delayed in our city. They're very expensive. So the new Elizabeth line that was recently opened in London cost about £14 billion to construct, with about 50% of that coming from the state to make that. The recent Greater Dublin Area Transport Strategy has a price tag of about 25 billion euro. But the benefits go way beyond Dublin city centre and go way beyond Dublin. It's the other counties of Dublin, the other counties of the Greater Dublin area that it has the biggest impacts on. I think that unless, I know you're going to talk about finance later, but unless the Mayor has huge powers to raise finance, the funding for projects like Metrolink and DART Plus would always come from central government, and there could be tensions there. And transport projects have been used an awful lot in the past as almost like political footballs. And I'll show you some of the footballs here, unlike maybe footballs Jim might be used to. The Metro. This is a project that's been delayed 20, 30 years. I'm not saying a directly elected Dublin mayor will be able to expedite that, but these are the projects that our city needs. The next map there is the Lewis to Lucan, another project that's been delayed at least 20 years. The map there of the vista in front of Trinity is the public realm upgrade that that the city wants to do in front of Trinity, and Trinity is very supportive of. That has also been delayed. That has been talked about for over a decade, that coming into place. And then finally, you can see DART Plus, another project that's been delayed. So these big infrastructural projects have been delayed by decades, and the city needs them. So in terms of the public realm, this is another area. I'm going to say the word once, and I'm not going to say it again, road. I'm going to use the word the public realm, because that's what roads are. I've said it twice. Currently, the local authorities in Dublin have the power over street space allocation and the management of flow of traffic. So that's currently a power that all of the local authorities have. They've also got power over car parking, and I think this is a really powerful tool, because if you've got a car parking space, the likelihood of somebody driving increases exponentially. So if we want to encourage modal shift away from cars, car parking policy is a major tool. Also, car parks take up huge amounts of space. But on the other side, car parks make huge amounts of money, and the city councils and local authorities would know that. Large public transport plans that are currently in the works, I suppose the biggest one being Bus Connects, will have massive impacts upon the public realm. How we walk, how we cycle, what road space is given up, or say public realm is given over to these modes of transport, as well as with the Metro and the Lewis. So these will have huge impacts upon the public realm. Clean air zones as well. So these are other things that the Dublin authorities at the moment could in theory do. Introduce clean air zones, reduce traffic speeds, low traffic neighbourhoods. All of these could be done by the existing powers that the local authorities have. And the mayor could run on a mandate to introduce and include these. Over the past 5 years, the local authorities, I suppose, no more so than with COVID, were able to expedite a lot of the cycling works that needed to be done around the city. And with the support of the NTA, this has rapidly happened across the city, but much more needs to be done in the city and around the city in terms of active modes of transport. And here you can see the next bullet point. I talk about Paris, and the mayor of Paris, she's decided by 2024, the year the Olympics are in that city, that there would be more bicycles than cars on the road. And again, this is it was an election promise, and it's something that she's started to deliver on. I suppose my final point there is then that electoral support for these big vision ideas would have a mandate. This mandate then could be pushed forward. This mandate could then be used to get the couple of kilometres in Galway that's required for the seafront cycleway, or get what's happening in Sandyford across the line, or Sandymount across the line. Those are the kind of things that a directly elected mayor could do. So to conclude, one of the things that I would be concerned about with a mayor's office is the duplication of activities. Activities, to ensure that they're not duplicated between the Department of Transport and the NTA, that a mayor's office with added transport power would be able to do, wouldn't be duplicating what's already there. And I think the former Taoiseach said it quite well earlier when he said that numbers of consultants being kind of spread across and everybody doing little bits here and there. My next point basically says we've gotten away from that in the management of transport in the city. Over the past decade, we've really streamlined transport agencies, and we've been able to make it more coherent as to who's in control of what, not only in Dublin, but also across the rest of Ireland. This meant, the establishment of the NTA, the National Transport Authority, and the National Transport Authority prior to being set up was a Dublin Transport Office. So to revert back to a Dublin Transport Office, you'd really want to see the logic behind doing something like that. The existing transport agencies have a large pool of very skilled workers that work consistently in transport. They're very specialised, and I can tell you as an academic that teaches this area, the skills are very much in demand, and it's very hard to get people into these jobs. So to move away from it, to move away from what's currently there and adding more into the system, I'm not sure how good an idea that would be. The other point I would like to make then is on the economies of scale. So we've heard of London, we've heard of New York and all these other places. These are massive cities. At the moment, let's say in terms of regulation of public transport, the slide at the start showed 90% of all public transport trips happened in the capital. So why would we have an extra regulator, and why would there be a second regulator when it would only be serving 10% of the rest of the trips? We expect that to grow, obviously. But that's one of the things that I think we would need to think about, the economies of scale, and I think on any of the powers that a new mayor could have. I do think a Dublin mayor could have substantial impact on the public realm, and this is one of the key things that I think they could bring across the line, with a mandate for adding road space to whatever it is that we decide that it should be. Having that mandate, we could create things like low emission zones, we could create priority for low carbon transport. One of the things about transport is that it causes an awful lot of air quality issues, and air quality is very poor in our city on some days. That's because of the large fleet of diesel vehicles and diesel buses, and all these kind of things are changing. But we do need to think about how we do that, and I do think a directly elected Dublin mayor could do something like that. Then my final point, I think it's not a point from 5 years ago, but it's a point that's more important than ever before. The priority for us all is climate action. I did have a map up here that showed all of the parts of Dublin that will be flooded in 10, 20 years' time if we don't get climate action right. We need to act with urgency. We need the systems that deliver that urgently. The City Council has been fantastic in some of the things that they deliver, but we don't have to reduce emissions anymore. We have to substantially cut them, and that has to happen before the end of the decade. So whatever we put in place, whatever system is in place, can't inhibit the work that's currently been done, because the clock is there and it is ticking. I'm sure the clock is ticking on me too, up here as well. So on that point, I will thank you all for your attention and all for your time that you're given over the weekends. And as I said at the start, what you do here does matter, and it does end up in programmes for government, and it does make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Great presentation. Really good.